Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I am Tyler Osby.
And today we're getting back into the Metal Gear series. Tyler, how amped are you on a scale of 1 to Solid Snake?
I'm definitely Solid Snake. You can't say that. I'm doing this like hand motion thing. You can't see it, but my hands are up in the air. I'm very excited to do part 2 of our Metal Gear Solid. Well, our Metal Gear saga. We are on to Metal Gear Solid now, which is the third game in the Metal Gear franchise, because we don't count Snake's Revenge. Wasn't made by Kojima. It's not canon. We don't count that one.
We don't talk about you, Snake's Revenge, but we still love you just the same.
It's true. It's actually
you gotta let them know that.
Not a terrible game, I hear.
Good to know.
So when we last left our hero, Solid Snake, it was the year 1990 in real life, not in the game. I believe Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake takes place in 1999, I want to say.
Ooh, the future.
Yeah, the future.
In the future.
The future. So Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake came out in 1990 on the MSX system. That's that popular computer system in Japan and somewhat in Europe. It never saw a North America release or anywhere outside of Japan while it was new. It was included with on the second disc of the Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence Edition. So that's like the first time that game ever really left Japan. But that wasn't the only Metal Gear sequel. We talked about Snake's Revenge just a second ago. That was an NES game that was exclusive to North America, and then it came out 2 years later in Europe, and that one never came out in Japan at all. It's okay. Wasn't made by Kojima. We don't talk about that one. But I have heard that it's okay, like as a game from a fun perspective.
Everyone should know that. Fans of Metal Gear know that. Give it a chance.
You might still like it if you like Metal Gear for the gameplay. Anyway, there wouldn't be another Metal Gear game for 8 years after the release of Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. What I think is kind of crazy about this period of time, at least in video game history, is like, so there's the jump between the NES and the PlayStation 1 is so large that it feels like there should be so much time in between those games. So think about games that came out in 1990, like Metal Gear 2, and then think about like 3D polygon games like Metal Gear Solid that came out in 1998. And now think about the difference between a game that comes out today and a game that came out in 2012. Like, yeah, sure, they're better now in terms of like graphical fidelity and quality on that level. But I feel like a game from 2012, that's 8 years ago, it does not feel like it's as big as the gap between a game from 1990 to 1998.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's just a crazy time. Every time a new console came out, it was like a revelation of just like everything is so much better now. And now when it's like a new console comes out, you're like, oh, cool. It'll look better, I'm sure, but it's not like the like generational shift that was like from that period. Like same thing goes with computers now too. Like if you picked up a Mac now from like 2010, you could probably still use it. It would be a little slow. Maybe if you put a solid state drive in it, you'd be feeling pretty good. But if you were using a computer in like 2000 and you picked up a computer from 1990, worlds apart. That's crazy.
I feel like that whole thing about being like, because I remember as a kid thinking like, oh my gosh, the N64 is going to change everything. It's going to be so much more amazing than the SNES, you know? And I don't get that feeling anymore with video game consoles. I really don't.
Yeah, and part of that is like being a kid and like looking at screenshots in magazines and going, oh my gosh, it'll never get better than this. This is basically real life. How can they get better than this, right?
Yeah.
Which is like some of that is being a little kid and just being constantly enthralled by everything. And then so nowadays we're like old jaded adults, but I think some of that is still warranted. Like I still think there were people who were 30 in the 90s that still felt that way about games. I hope so anyway. Man, time flies. Anyway, there's 8 years between Metal Gear 2 and Metal Gear Solid, but Kojima wasn't like hibernating during those 8 years. So in 1988, a little bit before Metal Gear 2, he released a game called Snatcher. That was a graphic adventure game, and I think it was probably pretty cool. It came out on the MSX, I think, and some older things. Actually, let me double check what system that came out on. It was kind of like a point and click adventure.
1988
came out.
Sounds like
1988.
the year of...
It came out on the MSX, the PC 8801, the PC Engine, and then it did later come out on the Sega CD and the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Kojima also made a game called Police Knots in 1994. That was on the PC 9821, and it also came out in 1996 on the 3DO. Man, remember 3DO?
Oh, the 3DO.
There was a minute there where everything looked like the 3DO was going to be it, you know?
Everything was coming up 3DO, and then it just didn't.
That year was 1994. Police Knots also came out on the PlayStation, Sega Saturn. I think it came out on the Sega CD as well, I want to say. So he wasn't just doing nothing between Metal Gear 2 and Metal Gear Solid.
You said hibernating, which made me think he just like walked into his house and closed the door, and 8 years went by while he was thinking of Metal Gear, just in like a half asleep, half meditative state.
Yeah, just like slowly formulating, not writing anything down, of course, just formulating in his brain what was going to end up being the entire story of Metal Gear Solid.
He was like
from
doing
the
that
first
thing.
Game on.
He was doing that thing where your eyes like go up and then they twitch back and forth. You know, like you're in like deep thought, like but a robot. You know, like that, kind of like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So he wasn't doing that. We can confirm.
Wasn't doing that.
If you thought he
was
did
making,
that,
right.
He does
He
not
was
do
making
that.
Snatcher, and he was making Police Knots. And those games aren't directly related to Metal Gear, although Meryl Silverbur is a character in Police Knots, and she's also a character in Metal Gear Solid. I don't think they're the same person. Like, those games don't take place in the same universe, but they are, like, sort of the same kind of person in Police Knots. It's also in Metal Gear Solid.
What was the name again? What was the name?
Meryl Silverbur? Silverborough?
You know what? That's just a
Metal
cool
Gear.
name. So yeah,
It's a very cool
that's
name.
why you kept it. I see it.
Yeah. Those are a couple of good examples of Kojima really developing his storytelling chops and learning how to tell stories in video games. If you take a look at Kojima's gameography, I think that's a real term, like discography or filmography. It's
right.
pretty clear. Yeah, I think that's right. If you take a look at his gameography, it's pretty clear that he loves telling deep and meaningful stories in games. So every single one of the games that he has ever had a significant role on told a story. The original Metal Gear games had way more story in them than other games at their time, where story was usually just like a backdrop that just sort of got you into why you're doing the whatever action that's happening, and it wasn't really integral to the experience. Kojima also described the first game that he ever worked on that wasn't released, a game called Lost World, WARLD. It's like a combination of war and world.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was the first game he ever worked on for the MSX that never came out, but he described it as Mario-esque action game with a story.
He's like, you're a plumber. Your name is Dario. Yep. You wear coveralls.
Yep.
And you fight gigantic walking apples with faces.
That's right.
And you jump on.
And then the game was shut down for plagiarism, which wouldn't be the first time something Kojima worked on got shut down for plagiarism. But we'll get to that in a minute.
More episodes. Yeah.
Ooh. So what are we looking at here? What is Metal Gear Solid? I feel like I should take a step back here and like describe just kind of what Metal Gear Solid is.
I've been so confused the last like 3 minutes. I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
It's not
Metal
true.
Gear Solid is the third game in the Metal Gear franchise. The gameplay of it is similar to the NES games and the MSX games from the years before. It's a very stealth-focused game. It's basically like a 3D version of those 2D action games. So it's like, fully 3D, which adds a little bit to the realism, gives a little bit more weight to the story. You play as Solid Snake, same character you play as in the other two Metal Gear games. He's like a sneaking specialist who has to maneuver around guards or through the base, basically to advance the storyline. There's a few boss fights where you're not sneaking, and there's a few boss fights where stealth is like kind of part of it. But ultimately, though, it's a story-driven game. So let's go into a little bit of setup on what the story here is, so you have a little bit of context on the rest of the episode. So after Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, Snake retires. He pulls away from the world. 6 years later, in the year 2005, 6 years after the events of Metal Gear 2, there's a unit of cybernetically enhanced special forces soldiers called Foxhound, which you'll recall if you played the original Metal Gear games was the name of Solid Snake's unit. So it's like his old unit. They have seized a nuclear weapons disposal facility on an island in the Fox Archipelago in Alaska. The island is called Shadow Moses.
Ooh, that sounds very intense, like very spy-y. I like it.
Yeah. So Snake's got a connection there because it's his old unit, even though it's a bunch of people that weren't in the unit when he was in the unit. So it's like a totally different thing now. But basically, because they took over this site, they've got a Metal Gear. And now they're threatening the U.S. with total nuclear annihilation if they don't receive two things. 1, the remains of Big Boss, who's the bad guy from the original Metal Gear, and also $1 billion.
That's a lot of money back then.
It's not as much now, but it was a lot of money then.
I feel like the Metal
Hyperinflation
Gear
is crazy.
The Metal Gear is more valuable, right? Because the Metal Gear is like you can do anything.
Yeah, you could even get $1 billion for it.
Man, I know you said it. We haven't gotten there yet, but this is already starting to sound more and more like you were saying, where it's like more anime story than it is like military. Like you think it's military, but like no,
not really. Yeah, these are all cybernetically enhanced soldiers.
There's still giant robots.
Yeah, still giant robots. So just when Snake thought he was out, they got to pull him back in so he can go save the world from his old unit. Roy Campbell, who is Snake's commanding officer from Metal Gear 2, pulls him out of retirement, sends him in. So Snake infiltrates the facility, saves Meryl, who was part of Foxhound also, but then when Foxhound turns bad, she decides to not be part of it, so she gets taken hostage. So one of the first things you do is rescue her. Turns out she is pretty awesome herself, doesn't really need rescuing. Save a few more people, you beat some bad guys, bada bing, bada boom, you finish the game.
So you win.
Yeah, so the story is all about tracking down the members of Foxhound and eliminating them. Here's the roster for Foxhound. You got Revolver Ocelot. He's a crack shot with a 6-shooter. He has long hair and a mustache. He's kind of like a cowboy, but he doesn't wear a cowboy hat. You got Decoy Octopus. He's a master of disguise. The rumor is that he'll even drain the blood from the person he's trying to impersonate and put it into himself, which is super gross.
Whoa, that is really gross.
Yeah, but it allows him to like do things like pass DNA tests. You got Vulcan Raven, who's like a shaman who has this like huge gun, and he's always being followed by ravens. And he's like very philosophical with the way he kills people, I guess. You got Sniper Wolf, who's a super good Iraqi Kurdish sniper. She also has a weird connection with wolves. She like communicate with them. It's strange. You got Psycho Mantis, who is this weird guy with psychic powers. It's really hard to just describe him. And then you've got their leader. And who would be the nemesis of Solid Snake? Liquid Snake, of course. Come on.
Yeah, because Gas Snake is really gross. No one wants Gas Snake.
Yeah, he just smells all the time.
Just like,
walking around.
It's so
Everybody's
stinky.
like, oh, yeah, it's gross. So you got Liquid Snake and Solid Snake. They have a pretty complicated backstory. They're both like clones of the original Big Boss. I think that's maybe a big reveal later on in this game, but the game's 20 years old, so, put your sunglasses on and deal with it.
We're not saying spoilers at all anymore. We're in an old game right now.
Yeah.
I spoiled Legend of Zelda. We're gonna spoil Metal Gear Solid, the old ones, not the new ones, the old ones.
Yeah. This is probably the last one that I'll do any real spoilers on. It's definitely still worth playing. All that stuff becomes very important. Like if you even fire up like Metal Gear Solid 4, all of this stuff is basically being spelled out for you immediately. So
You ready for another Metal Gear spoiler? You ready for it? Solid Snake, not an actual snake. Spoilers.
Whoa, you're blowing my mind here. You got to keep a lid on that stuff.
I just wish there were, in my mind, there's like a 14-year-old kid listening to this right now, and the whole time he's like, what is with all these snakes fighting with guns in the military? It makes no sense.
Yeah, well, they're not actually snakes, and it's not a twist. So Snake meets a few friends along the way, including Hal Emmerich. He's a scientist who works at the base. He's like super nerdy. He's in a Japanese anime. He describes himself as an otaku, which is an American who is into Japanese culture. So he wants to be called Otacon, which is a super awesome name, I think. So Snake calls him Otacon. That's his character's
nice
name.
Snake.
He's in the
Snake's
rest
a
of
nice
the series.
guy.
Yeah, he's calling people what they want to be called,
Good guy, Solid Snake.
So anyway, shenanigans ensue, plots are twisted, Solid Snake defeats Liquid Snake, saves the world. He rides off into the sunset on a snowmobile, either with Otacon or Meryl, depending on whether or not you survive the sequence where Ocelot tortures Snake and the player has to mash the triangle button just like super hard. And if you fail, then you're riding off into the sunset with Otacon. If you win, you ride off with Meryl. I'm pretty sure, I'm just recalling that off the top of my head. So I'm pretty sure that's the difference between the
Does
the
Meryl
two
like
endings.
die from the Ocelot torture thing, or is it just assumed that you don't, because you failed it, she doesn't want to ride on your snowmobile?
I think it's just if you failed it, she's like, ugh, this Snake guy, not as cool as I thought.
Not as cool as I thought he was.
Yeah. It's really fun. It's very ridiculous. Like I said, it's kind of like an anime. You just kind of have to go into it knowing that it's a little bit ridiculous. And I think this story just gets better as the series goes on. It also gets way more anime as the series go on. I'd love it. You should play it. Okay.
I really want to.
So that's the back.
You're really
that's
getting me jazzed about these, by the way. Like, I really want to play them.
Oh,
but
you really should, dude.
Do you have to have? Well, we'll talk about that when we talk about how you can play these now. You'll tell us about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you the best way to play this one. So now that you have the backstory and what the story is, the gameplay, you kind of know what we're talking about if you've never played Metal Gear Solid. Let's talk about development. So Kojima had started work on the next Metal Gear in as early as 1994, which is 4 years after Metal Gear 2, so that's a good amount of time. Originally, he wanted to release it for Trip Hawkins' 3DO system. This was, again, that period of time where it looked like the 3DO was going to be super cool, and so Kojima and Konami wanted in on that.
By the way, we should probably say we did an episode on the 3DO, and you can go back and listen to what we're talking about.
It's
probably
very
something
sad.
We should tell you. Yeah, it's really sad. Poor guy. He essentially didn't he pretty much goofed because he gave the 3DO model to a bunch of different companies instead of making it himself. So there were like so many different versions of it. It was very confusing to people.
Yeah, it was tough for him. I felt bad. It was made by Trip Hawkins, who was the guy who started EA, Electronic Arts. And then after Electronic Arts, he was like, I know it's better than making software, making hardware. And so he went and made the 3DO, and it failed miserably, and it was very sad.
Wah, wah, wah.
And now he just hangs out in exile. Actually, I don't know what Trip Hawkins is doing right now. He's a billionaire. He's probably doing whatever he wants. So yeah, Kojima had released Police Knots on the 3DO, but pretty quickly it was apparent that the 3DO was kind of a dud, and they didn't want to hitch their horses to that wagon. So they moved development from the 3DO to the original PlayStation.
Ooh.
They chose the name Metal Gear Solid instead of Metal Gear 3 for a few reasons. First, the game, though successful, still wasn't super well known. Metal Gear 2, again, hadn't even been released outside of Japan, so they didn't want to confuse players in different regions. It's kind of like how the Final Fantasy games had different numbers when they came to US because not all of them were released outside of Japan. They didn't want to do that where they had different numbers for the United States, which I think was kind of a mistake on the part of Final Fantasy, one that they corrected later on, but Konami and Kojima didn't really want to do that. But for Metal Gear, instead of calling it Metal Gear 3, they just decided to drop the numbers altogether and called it Metal Gear Solid. Solid because Solid Snake is that's the code name of the protagonist, but also because Solid symbolized the shift into 3D because the characters are made of polygons, they felt more solid. So yeah. And also, by getting rid of the number, you don't alienate people who feel like they need to go back and play the earlier games. How many times have you seen a game or a movie and it's blah, 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 3, and you're like, well, I didn't really play the first 2, so I'm probably going to skip this one too, and then you just stop thinking about it? Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Cyberpunk 2077. I'm like, I didn't play the first 2076 of these. I think I'm going to skip.
I'm also a little perturbed that, I think a lot of people are confused by it, but calling it the Xbox Series X is very confusing to me.
I agree.
They should have just said Xbox 2 or something,
Yeah, I think they want to get away from, in the case of the Xbox, we take a little divergence here. I think what they want to do there is get away from the notion of separate generations of systems. Like Sony wants PlayStation 5. There's a clean break. Maybe the PlayStation 5 plays old games. Maybe it doesn't. I think maybe it's been confirmed it plays old games. I don't know. But there's a difference between the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. I think what Microsoft wants to do is they want to just say hey, if you buy an Xbox game, you play it on your Xbox. And if you have the newer Xbox, you get some more features, you get whatever. And then I'm sure at some point in time, they will start to drop support for older Xboxes in their games. But for the first, I think 2 years for the Series X, they've said there will be no exclusives. So everything that plays on Xbox One will play on the Series X. And there won't be anything that doesn't play on older stuff, at least for the first couple of years. So
I like that. I like that a lot.
Me too. It also is part of their strategy of we don't care where you play your games as long as you buy them from us. So that feeds right into allowing games to be played on PC as well. They don't care. They just want you to buy your games from them. They don't really care what system you're playing them on. And I like that strategy. So anyway, that's the divergence. You bring it back.
Bringing it right back.
Bringing it back. Okay. So they really got this started on the development in 1995, once they were sure of their decision to move to the PlayStation. So they started with the intention of creating the best PlayStation game ever. And that's in quotes because somebody important to the project said those exact words. We're making the best PlayStation game ever, which is a pretty lofty goal. But in my opinion, they came pretty darn close, I think. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of a game that I would place above it on the original PlayStation. Can you think of anything? I mean, I know you haven't played Metal Gear Solid, but like, what are some of the all-time greats, you know?
Twisted Metal.
Yeah, I didn't play that much Twisted Metal, so
I like Twisted
wouldn't
Metal
put
a
that
lot.
above.
Yeah, I mean, like old Tomb Raiders.
Yeah, I guess I haven't played that many old PlayStation games, so.
Yeah, but you know what? I think a lot of people would agree with you.
Yeah,
You know,
this
I think
is definitely the
a good
most
take.
recent original PlayStation game that I have played through the whole way, and I did that only a couple of years ago. I try to play through the whole series every couple of years, which reminds me, I'm still on Metal Gear Solid 3 in my last playthrough, and I really need to keep working on that game.
Finish that game.
That's right. Anyway, they wanted Metal Gear Solid to feel super realistic, so they got training from a SWAT team so they could learn about tactics and weapons and vehicles and explosives, which is freaking crazy, man.
Especially for a game then.
Yeah. Especially for how unrealistic the story is. It's crazy that they wanted the actual gameplay to be pretty realistic. Kojima is quoted as saying, "If the player isn't tricked into believing the world is real, then there's no point in making the game." Because yeah, that's so funny, because then you get to the Foxhound unit and all of them have like some weird superpower or like crazy sort of supernatural thing going on with them. So it's like this balance of hyper realism with the just absurd storyline.
Dude, you saying really that funny. Just made me realize how badly I want to do a one-off episode on Fear. First Encounter Assault Recon.
That's a great game.
That first game is amazing, and it actually legitimately scared me. And then I never played 2 and 3, and I heard they got way off the deep end, and I love talking about series like that, because you could say Fable was like that too. You know, Fable 2 is great, but Fable 3, a lot of people, I think there was even a recent quote saying he was kind of regretting going that far. So it's like, yeah, but I would love to do a First Encounter Assault Recon episode. Just as a fun little one-off. I'm going to put it on the list.
All right. So for the design here, we got Yoji Shinkawa. He designed all of the characters and robots. Snake in particular, his body was based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, and his face was based on Christopher Walken, which is an interesting choice to make.
That's amazing.
I don't think it really showed up in the PlayStation version because, you know, the graphics on the PlayStation don't exactly hold up these days. Like, you can barely even tell Snake has a face. I'm going to be real. When you look at this game, he's got like 2 eyes maybe and a mouth, and you can't really see what's going on.
You know who has 2 eyes and a mouth? Christopher Walken. Nailed it.
That's true. Nailed it.
What a weird... That might be the fact of the episode.
Christopher Walken has 2 eyes.
And Jean-Claude Van Damme has a body with a face of Christopher Walken. This creepy Frankenstein monster they're building in the basement at Sony. Or Konami, excuse me. This is Konami, not Sony.
The music was composed by various musicians at Konami, including a song with lyrics that plays during the ending. It's called "The Best Is Yet to Come." That would be kind of a tradition, at least with a Solid series. I know Metal Gear Solid 3 has a song with lyrics in it. I can't remember if 2 and 4 do. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure 2 does at the end, like the post-credits scene where Snake is like sort of talking, like breaking the fourth wall a little bit. I think there's lyrics during that.
So it ends kind of like the movie Cats a lot?
Yeah, kind of.
He breaks the fourth wall and talks into it, and talks about how good it is, how to treat international spies and how what they look like.
Kind of, yeah.
Oh, good stuff.
This is the first game that has the iconic Metal Gear Solid main theme song, which is awesome. It's in the first 3 games, but they removed it from the 4th game because, and this is where we get to the plagiarism thing, there were accusations that it was plagiarized from a Russian composer, which is a bit of a bummer. I listened to the song that it supposedly is based off of, though, and it's pretty close. Like,
Ooh,
yeah.
Busted.
Yeah, busted. So they removed it from the 4th one because I guess they felt like they should.
You know what? Good for them, though. Do the right thing, you know?
That's right. Yeah, which is too bad because it really would have been super impactful at the end of the 4th one. But we'll get there. We'll get to the 4th one. Konami first showed Metal Gear Solid at the Tokyo Game Show in 1996, which is 6 years after the release of Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake. It was still early stages at this point in time, but not playable. They showed it again at the 1997 Tokyo Game Show, still not playable, but at TGS in 1998, it was actually playable because it was pretty close to coming out, at least in Japan at that point in time. So since their goal was to make the best PlayStation game ever, they had to have a marketing campaign to match it. So they went all out, especially in Japan. At that TGS, they had a J-pop concert. They had an interview with Hideo Kojima. They had like a huge booth. It was like a whole thing there. And then when the game was released in Japan, they had tons of commercials, magazine ads, in-store demos, and they gave away a ton of demo discs to players too. It's estimated that they handed out over 12 million demos for the game in 1998, which is bonkers. I think a lot of people had that. I don't know if it was the exact same demo disc in the US. I know that PlayStation had a promotion going with Pizza Hut at the time that got, so you would buy a pizza and get a demo disc basically. And there was at least one of those demo discs that had the Metal Gear Solid demo on there. And so that's how a lot of people played it first. I think didn't you have a Metal Gear Solid demo?
I did. That's how that's the only way I've played the game.
Did you get it from Pizza Hut or did you get it somewhere else?
I think so.
All right.
Growing up in Eagle River, Alaska, there was not a lot to do except go to Pizza Hut. So spent a lot of time there. Got that
game
smell.
takes place in your home.
Oh, it does. Alaska. It does. Yeah, that's why I played it, The Last Frontier. That's where it's at.
The demo was actually a pretty long game, especially for as far as demos go. Like it was almost half an hour of gameplay. You got that first section in the basement, you go up the elevator to just outside the base in Shadow Moses. They could have cut it there, like you just sneak to the elevator, then you sort of get the title sequence. It's super awesome, and then they could have just said to be continued, and it would have been a pretty good place to stop it. But no, you get to go outside of the base, you get to sneak into the base, and then you get to sneak through the base all the way up to the section where the DARPA chief Donald Anderson dies. And then that's where they are like to be continued. And that's a pretty great place to leave it as well. So
that's cool. So they ended on actually like a cliffhanger. That's great. I don't think I ever got that far. I got caught a lot, childhood attention span with a stealth game.
Yep. Yeah. And there's something about playing games when you're a kid where you're like not even necessarily playing them to make progress. You're just like living in that moment, and you don't actually care if you finish or not.
Oh yeah. I was a spy. I think my brother and I just tried to shoot people, even though that's not the point of the game for sure.
Nope. The whole point is to not shoot people if you can avoid it. But yeah, so when the game finally came out in 1998, it was a smash hit, both in Japan and North America. Players and critics both loved the gameplay and the focus on story. Some publications even called it the best game ever made, not even the best PlayStation game ever made. So that's crazy. That's what they were going for when they made it, was to make the best game ever. Although the best game ever is the thing that happened. It was said by the PlayStation official magazine in the UK, so there may have been some bias there. I don't know.
I mean, we've seen Nintendo do that before. Makes sense.
Yeah. But it was also nominated by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences for Outstanding Achievement in Character or Story Development category. It actually lost that category to Pokemon Red and Blue, which is kind of crazy to me. I mean, I love me some Pokemon Red and Blue. It's one of the best games released in 1998. But I don't know if it's great because of its characters or story.
Yeah, I agree.
That seems weird that it would lose, that Metal Gear Solid would lose to that. But, that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it's just the way it happens. It is unfortunate, though, because I agree. I don't think Pokemon Red and Blue is really known for its story. Maybe, because really it's like Go Through Jam's Team Rocket stuff, but Team Rocket stuff's kind of a basic villain. That's not really
bad. It's not like it's not a bad story. Bad. It's just there. It just
exists. Do you think the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences was like, we love the way that each gym trainer has like a very big glaring weakness. We love that. Why would you only have rock Pokemon? It makes no sense.
Oh man. 1998 though, that was a crazy year in gaming. You got Metal Gear.
Really?
You got Pokemon, at least in the US. You got Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, Half-Life. Gosh.
Wowzers. That's a great year.
What a great year.
That the original got Wowzers out of me. Oh, yeah. Double Wowzers. I said it. First time ever. Double Wowzers on a podcast.
Holy moly. We're breaking records here. Metal Gear Solid also has a pretty crazy legacy. I mean, the game basically wrote the book on modern stealth gameplay. The originals made stealth like an actual genre that people could actually like, and then Metal Gear Solid just made it better. I think games like Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell wouldn't be the same. They may not even exist if it weren't for Metal Gear Solid. Even like Thief, some of the later Thief games are probably pretty heavily inspired by Metal Gear as well. Anything stealth related, basically at this point in time, is inspired by Metal Gear.
Oh,
so,
yeah. And there's people out there that love, well, you're one of them, Splinter Cell. And there would
I do love
definitely
Splinter
be
Cell.
no Splinter Cell without Metal Gear Solid. There's no way.
Yeah, Splinter Cell was supposed to be like Microsoft's answer to Metal Gear Solid 2. And maybe we'll get to that someday when we do a Splinter Cell.
Someday. History. I think that's already on the list. I'm looking at the list right now. I'll look it up for you.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it is.
So today, there are several ways to play the original Metal Gear Solid. It's available on the PS3 like classic store where you can play original PlayStation games. You can buy it. It's like $8 or something. I don't think it's on PlayStation 4, which like is kind of weird. Like they didn't put very many original PlayStation games on the PlayStation 4. It's been re-released a couple of times over the years. I have the copy that is the version that was sold just before Metal Gear Solid 4 came out, and it was like included in a 3-pack. You got Metal Gear Solid, you got Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 in one pack. And what's cool about this version is it's still the original PlayStation game, but it comes in like a DVD-sized box that kind of looks like a PlayStation or a PS2 game box, which I think is kind of neat. And so I've just hung on to that one over the years.
Looks good on a shelf.
Yeah, it does. And it fits with the rest of my Metal Gear Solid collection. So it looks great. They did release a version on PC a couple of years later. I have a copy of that as well. It doesn't really run very well on more modern operating systems. So someday when I build my dream Windows 98 XP gaming rig, this will be a prime candidate for playing on that machine. It's not a great port, but it exists. So I guess it's worth mentioning. But the best way to play this game, and I think I'll get some flack for this possibly, but I think the best way to play this game is the GameCube remake, which is called Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. That's the best way to play this game.
Also,
this
a delicious
version,
gummy candy to Twin Snakes. Have you ever had Twin Snakes?
Right.
Very good
I've
gummy
never
candy.
had Twin Snakes.
You should eat Twin Snakes while playing Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes.
Okay. I'll make a note of that for the next time I play this game.
That's your hot take and my hot take put together.
Great. So this version of the game takes basically all of the gameplay improvements from Metal Gear Solid 2 and then remakes just the original game with all of that stuff intact, including graphic updates, like it looks like a GameCube game. So basically it brings the whole game forward a generation. You can actually tell what Snake's face looks like. So, you know, we're getting there. I'm not sure I would say it looks like... Yeah, I'm not sure I would say it looks like Christopher Walken, but you can definitely make out his face. And a few really nice features. You can fire weapons in first-person mode, which kind of ruins one of the boss fights, but I think is worth it anyway. There's also a few like Mario cameos in there, like Otacon has like a Mario and Yoshi thing on his desk, which I think is fun.
You know why they made Christopher Walken the face of Solid Snake?
No, why?
Because he's the weapon of choice. Boom.
Hey.
Fat Boy Slim pun. Did you guys stick around for the Fat Boy Slim pun on the podcast? You did, didn't you? Well, you just got it. All right. I've been sitting on that for like 10 minutes, just waiting for you to bring it up again. Ooh, felt good. Gonna edit it out?
Right.
Nope, no way. Leave that in there.
Absolutely not. But the reason that I'll get some flack for preferring this version of the game, though, is because of the way they remade the cutscenes and re-recorded all of the voice acting. So they re-recorded every single line in the game they used the original voice actors. The voice of Solid Snake, David Hayter, actually took a pay cut so that they could afford to bring back all of the original voice actors. Some will say this version is inferior because of the voice recordings, which actually changed a few things. One, they actually recorded it on a real recording setup. When they recorded the game originally, they didn't use a soundproof room, and like you could sort of hear some of the outside noises getting in, which you couldn't really tell on the original PlayStation because the audio hardware wasn't that great. But once they loaded those files onto the GameCube and you could actually hear some of like things you weren't supposed to be able to hear, it was like, maybe we should redo this. But they also changed a couple of the characters. So Mei Ling, her voiceover loses her Chinese accent. So she gets an American accent, which actually makes sense for the character because she's Chinese American. She was born in America. She grew up in America. She's an American. She has an American accent. That makes sense. Why would she have a Chinese accent if she grew up in America? Unless she just like only ever encountered Chinese people, which I don't think is the case. Did we just step on a nerve?
I feel like we just touched a Tyler nerve right now.
I just like when people are like, oh, they changed her accent, it shows that they don't really know the character and her backstory. And why it makes more sense for her to have an American accent.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so she had the Chinese accent in Metal Gear Solid 1. She still had that accent in Metal Gear Solid 2, and it's I'm glad they changed it because it's just wrong. They also changed Naomi Hunter's accent to American, which I think is for similar reasons, but I'm not 100% sure why they got rid of her British accent. But the other thing they did for the Twin Snakes is they redid every single cutscene, and they're in this like over the top flashy style that was clearly influenced by the Matrix. Like there's tons of slow-mo, impossible stunts, and there's just like it's much more unrealistic than the originals. I like it better because I think it fits better with the ridiculous storyline, but others don't really like it and they think the new cutscenes are bad and they're wrong and I hate them. That's all.
Oh, I love this. I love getting into your Metal Gear Solid hot takes.
I think the game also plays pretty well in the Dolphin emulator. So if you, of course, if you have a legitimate copy of it, don't go pirating games.
Of course.
We're not a piracy promoting podcast.
No, we're the opposite of a piracy podcast. We're a Law and Order podcast.
Dong dong. Buy your games. But if you want to play them, you can play them in the Dolphin emulator and you can run it in high res. You can run it with graphical improvements. I love it. That's the best way to play it. So Twin Snakes development was financed by Nintendo, and it was developed by Silicon Knights, which is the same people that made Eternal Darkness.
Ooh.
Yeah. So because of this, the game is a GameCube exclusive, which I think is extremely funny because no other Metal Gear game is out on a Nintendo console. There are more Solid Snakes in Super Smash Bros. Games than there are in any other games on Nintendo consoles because
I was at a party and I didn't know he was on Smash Brothers.
Yeah, it was like really weird when they announced Solid Snake in Smash Brothers. I was like, what? Why? And then I was like, oh yeah, he had one remake of the original Metal Gear Solid, and that's why he has like a connection to Nintendo.
Well, the old Metal Gears, right? Didn't you say they came out on NES?
Yeah, I guess you're
right.
But
that's not really Solid Snake though, right? That's a different guy.
Well,
or is it?
There's a whole that you're getting.
Did I just open up a bucket of worms?
You really did. That stuff. There's some real retconning that happens in Metal Gear Solid 5.
Okay.
Actually, I guess they don't retcon Solid Snake. They do some big boss retcons in Metal Gear Solid 5.
Okay. Well, we'll hold off on that because I don't want to open up a worm can.
Yeah. If you're a fan of the series, Metal Gear Solid 5 has some. There's some definite things that they like. Change in that game where you're just like, you just thought of that now. You didn't have this planned all along, but I still love you anyway, Kojima, because this is ridiculous.
I'm just here to make Fatboy Slim puns and listen to your hot takes on Metal Gear Solid voice work. That's what I'm here to do.
Twin Snakes, best version of Metal Gear Solid. Don't at me.
Oh, also talk about my favorite gummy candies on the podcast. That's the three things I've put towards this episode so far.
We appreciate you, Mike.
Thank you.
So to wrap this up, though, Metal Gear Solid was an incredibly important game, like in the grand scheme of things. I think it improved upon, and it again brought stealth gameplay to the masses, and it did it with like this charming and crazy storyline, which actually proved so like a younger Tyler who played these games a long time ago. This sort of proved that video games were a medium where great stories could be told. This, along with like Final Fantasy VII, the original Kingdom Hearts, like these are games that made me like Jaybird, obviously. Are games that all made me realize the storytelling potential of video games and how it's not always just about the gameplay, but also storylines. So I think the gameplay is great. I think it just continues to get better and better in each game as each game goes along. I love Metal Gear Solid 5. It's one of my favorite open world games of all time. And I also think it showed that a game can have like a military flair and some realism without taking itself too seriously. So that's it. I just love Metal Gear Solid. So I don't think there's any series of games like overarching story that I like more than the Metal Gear Solid series. So That's the first Metal Gear Solid. We'll continue on. We'll get into some Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, 4. Probably won't talk as much about 5 on the podcast, at least for a couple more years. But do you have any Metal Gear experience? You said you had played the demo.
That demo disc.
Is that the only Metal Gear experience you have?
That's literally the only Metal Gear experience I have is that demo disc. That's all I got.
That's great. I can't wait for you to play this game with fresh eyes.
Probably still smelled like buttery pan crust, too, from Pizza Hut when I got it. So
it's
good.
All greasy when you put it in the PlayStation.
Oh, yeah, because, I didn't wash my gross little fingers when I was playing games as a kid.
Obviously not. Nobody did.
No one does. Everyone just
That's
eats
right.
pizza and then grabs that N64 controller. Why is it so slimy? Disgusting. Okay.
Well, okay, then that's it then. What you been playing, Mike?
Oh man, I got a doozy of some lists of games I've been playing lately, including
All right.
an idea for I'm trying to play a game. I was wondering if you could help me. So we're gonna go through the ones I've played first. I finally did it. My friend told me to do it. I was on a road trip. I played Call of Duty Mobile.
My man.
I
What do you
played it.
think?
You definitely play bots for so much of that. There's no
Yeah.
way those are real people, right? Like I'm like
No,
maybe one or
absolutely
two
not.
people in a match are real and everyone else is bots. And I was playing this and I'm like, what's even the point? And I just turned it off.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that shows for like video games, especially games that are like multiplayer based, like games as a service. So like if you win the first game you play, you're like 100 times more likely to stick with it than if you lose the first game. So oftentimes they will put you in games with bots to make sure that you win so that you go, oh, this is cool. And then you keep playing.
PUBG Mobile was the same way.
Yeah. Remember when we played some PUBG Mobile and we like almost won a couple
we
times?
destroyed.
We just absolutely dominated until you actually find like the 2 or 3 real people that are in your game. And it feels good though, right? Like it makes you want to keep playing. So
Yeah,
anyway.
so I played that a bit, and I haven't played it since, really. It's still on my phone, though. Who knows? Maybe I'll just get bored and I'll play it once, It's just kind of fun to get, like, It is weird getting, like, a real decent-looking first-person shooter experience, though, on a cell phone. That felt weird. Also, I was actually into how the controls play. I really actually thought I would hate it, and I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, me too. I think the game is decent. I think it does what it sets out to do. I just like ultimately doesn't hold my attention for very long.
Speaking of not holding my attention, Destiny 2 fell off the bandwagon this week a little bit. I felt kind of
Me
bad.
too.
We were going to play a bunch of Iron Banana, and then we kind of did it, and then we just stopped.
I know. I might play some tomorrow night just to try to grind out the rest of those Iron Banner bounties. But yeah, this is kind of a lull in the Destiny, which is okay. It's how it goes sometimes.
It's okay. I've been playing more games because of that. So here's a fun thing I did. I had a show last night in a small town in Washington called Chehalis, and the guy who runs the show has a photography studio, and in his photography studio was an NES.
Oh.
And me and my buddy, he just typed in the cheat code for me, and we just beat Contra. Just played it and like beat it. It's like 30 minutes to beat it. It was so fun. And we continued a bunch, and we just shot things. It was really completely that's the best way to play that game. It's just with a friend, and you're just dying back and forth, and you're also like accidentally killing each other because the platforming, like if you fall behind your other teammate, you just die. It's like that classic Nintendo brutality of just like, you're never going to win this legitimately. And that was really fun. Also watching the photography guy was really good at Punch-Out, and he showed me like how you beat, because each bad guy in the original Punch-Out had like a certain combo of buttons you had to push to like beat him. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're all, it's like that game is actually more of like a puzzle rhythm game than a boxing game.
Yeah, he also said that the last guy, which I think it's pretty much known as Mike Tyson, is the last guy, because wasn't it called Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or something like that? But he's like impossible to beat. It's so hard to beat that. But I did that. That was really fun. And then I was playing a lot of 7 Days to Die with my brother this week because he got some time off, and we've been playing that together. And that's like it's like a 2-hour phone call while we play that game.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but the question I had for you, and this may end up being a episode one day, a one-off. Everyone, listen up, okay? Old Man Video Games got a story. I played for the PlayStation 2 as a child, and I loved Star Trek Elite Force. I loved that game. And I saw there was a Star Trek Elite Force 2, and I saw they were both released on Windows, and I'm like, they got to be on Steam. They're not on Steam. They're nowhere to be found, and unless I go online and buy a disc copy of it,
Ew.
I don't know what to do. I want to play these games. I have an itch right now because I've been watching a lot of Next Gen. And granted, that's Star Trek Voyager. I still want to play it. I want to phaser some Borg. Okay? And I can't find a way to play this game. I have no idea how to find it. And I'm like, this is a call out to the listeners. Like, if you guys know how to play this, let us know. Email us.
Well, if you've assuming you have a legal copy of the game for PlayStation 2, which I'm sure you do, you could play it in a PlayStation 2 emulator, and it might run okay.
Oh, that might be the way to do it. I'm sure I could buy the online copies. Like, well, the one for Elite Force 2 was like $30, which was kind of mind blowing. I was thinking like 10, for an older game. But there's a used video game store near my buddy's house, and I might just go there one day and be like, "Do you guys have these games for PC?" And if you do, I'll take them. And if you don't, I'll look and I'll get a PlayStation 2 copy, and then I'll just try to find an emulator.
Mm-hmm. That was developed by the same company that developed Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, which is one of my favorite games.
Ooh, but I beat Star Trek Elite Force 1. Like, I love that game so much.
That's
and I had
awesome.
like strategies, and I was super into it. You're like the Hazard team. It's so cool. It's like Star Trek, because it really was like, what happens if we made a Quake game that was Star Trek? That's really what it was.
Yeah,
I loved
PC
it.
Gaming Wiki says the game is unavailable on any platform of digital distribution. Only secondhand copies available. And actually, I would be worried, because this game is nearly 20 years old now, that if you bought a disc copy of it, it would be very hard to get running on your modern computer.
Oh, like you'd have to do, because that Windows, whatchamacallit service, the compatibility mode, it only goes so far, right?
Yeah, it you may be able to get it working, but maybe not.
There's got to be some super fans that have figured out a way how to do it. I'm going to do some Googling. But that was my thing. That was my big thing of like, oh man, I need to figure out, because I miss this game so much, and want to play it. I just want to play the first one and feel that nostalgia for like 10 minutes and then turn it off and never play it again. That's all I want.
Yep, I'm with you on that.
What have you been playing this week?
I have been playing. I played a little bit of Destiny, because we played a little bit of Iron Banana earlier this week. That's really all I've played. I played. I tried to play Jaybird. If anybody's been following me on Twitter, I tweeted a picture of my dad's old Apple II, which was brought to me here in California by my girlfriend's mom. She drove down. She brought a couple of things with her.
What a
from
saint.
my parents' house, which is awesome. The Apple II runs, and my disc with Jaybird was still in it. It was still inside the machine.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. But my dad did not include the joystick, so I'm not able to actually play. It says it has a keyboard control, but I loaded it up and I can't get it to do anything. Like, it just doesn't respond to keyboard input.
Your dad could like mail you the joystick though, right? That's not a big deal.
Yeah, probably. So that may
Probably
end
even
up,
find one, and you know.
Yeah, that may be what I end up doing. But anyway, that's where I'm at on that. So I almost played a little bit of Jaybird, training up for Jaybird Worlds, obviously, for the big tournament.
Jaybird Tournament Edition, yeah.
Yep. Let's see. I played some other stuff too. Oh, I bought Doom, the original Doom, like OG 1993 Doom on Switch, and I've been playing a little bit of that before I go to bed, which maybe isn't the best time to play because it's scary.
Oh, it's so scary. That is a very scary thing to play before you go to sleep, Tyler.
Yeah, but the Switch version is awesome. It runs very smoothly. The controls are great. It's definitely like a great way to play that game. It's only $5 too, so you know.
I might look into that, honestly.
Yeah,
I got
so I've been playing that. Yeah, you got the first one is $5, second one is $5, and then you can also get Doom 3 for $10. So you can get the first 3 for $20.
Yeah, and I saw that Doom 3 on Switch has all of the DLC included with it.
Yeah.
Which is really neat. I like that they did that.
Yeah, me too. So I played a little bit of that, and then I also played some... So I played some World of Final Fantasy. I'm on the final boss. I played through all of the different phases of the boss. I got to his final form, and then I got to the end part where, like, when he has just a little bit of HP left, he does this, like, countdown thing, and basically you just unload everything you have on him, and if you win, then you win everything, and if you don't win during that countdown, then you lose. But what he did right before he got to that point was he did some move that, like, confused my whole party. And then they just started attacking him sometimes, and then they were attacking each other. And so while this countdown was happening, my guy just kept hitting himself until he died. And then I had to start all of the fights over again. Yeah. I had to start them all over again. And I was like, this is BS. And I put it away, and I may be done with it. Maybe I'm just going to consider it done for now and move on, and maybe I'll come back to it. Cause like that is the thing that irks me the most about JRPGs, is when you like play for a long time, lose, and then you have nothing to show for it. I really, really hate that. Like if it had put me back to the beginning of that form of the fight, then that would have been fine. I would have just done it again. But because I had to go back and play like another hour's worth of fights, I was like, ugh.
Dude, before autosave, like in Morrowind, if I forgot to save and I died after like an hour of playing, I would just be like, nope, and I just walk away. Yeah. And then eventually it would come back, but I would be so mad that I wouldn't want to do that. It's
like a mechanic that just serves to make me, like, especially when they dump you back to the title screen, they don't even just, they just say, nope, this session is over. Like they basically are telling you to put it down and go somewhere else. I hate that.
I don't like that either.
Don't give me reasons to not play your game. Anyway,
maybe,
so I'm
maybe you want to
frustrated.
play your game.
Yeah. So I was frustrated by World of Final Fantasy, and I had originally planned to finish World of Final Fantasy before moving on to Fire Emblem, the Three Houses. But because I was so mad at World of Final Fantasy, I said, you know what? I'm going to move on anyway. So I played the first battle, like the tutorial battle in Fire Emblem. This was at like 2 a.m. last night, so I didn't get very far. But Fire Emblem is very fun, and can't wait to play some more of that.
Dude, I might want to just power through Fire Emblem on 3DS. I never finished. I'm very close to beating it too, but that was like my go-to travel thing. And now that I have a Switch, I'm worried that's going to take over. I got a lot of games. I got backlog games.
Yeah, I got a big backlog too. So
oh man,
that's it.
So
Besides
great,
that, I've been messing with my old Apple II. My dad also included a Macintosh Performa 400, which was my very first computer. It was my family computer when we were growing up, which I got running. I bought some extra things so that I could use an SD card in it instead of the hard drive, which is dead. So I was messing with getting that running, and then it just quit working on me. I think the capacitors are bad. That's the problem with old Macs from that era, is the capacitors just sort of leak cap juice everywhere. That's what the 8-bit guy calls it, cap juice. Gross. And so I took it all apart. I pulled some of the ROM chips out, which maybe I should have done because I bent the pins on it. Now I'm going to have to hope that I can fix it. But I washed it in soapy water, which feels very weird to just drop a computer's motherboard into soapy water, but I have been assured that it is okay as long as you let it dry for a few days. So I did that today. Now I'm letting it dry. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on how to fix old Mac computers.
Dude, you got to keep us updated, though. We want to know. I want to know.
I will. I do think that there is a recapping session in my future of me removing those old capacitors. There's 17 of them, and putting in new ones that won't leak everywhere.
You should live stream it on YouTube, like your hero.
My hero, Mac 84.
You should call yourself Mac 85.
Maybe I will. Yeah, so I actually have thought about live streaming that. So if you would watch that, let me know. I guess tweet at me. Let me know you watch that.
Tweet at Tyler. Tell him you'd
but
watch
otherwise,
him.
That's what I've been doing. I've been messing with that. I'm messing with my Raspberry Pi. I've just been doing a lot of tinkering. Also, instead of games, I've just been tinkering with my stuff because I got my new workbance. So I got all the space to tinker. So that's what I've been doing.
Tinkering's fun. Hey, you know what we got to do real quick? We got to do the emails. We got some emails. Oh
my goodness, this is a long episode.
I know. Do you want to do a couple emails and then we'll call it?
I'm gonna read the email from Old Man Ryan or middle-aged Ryan.
Youthful
hey guys,
and spry Ryan.
That's right. Hey guys, Ryan again. Super loving to delve back into more Zelda talk. I'm going to touch base back on the collection question from last week and add that the Xbox and Xbox 360 are my two favorites to collect for. 360 for the fact that games are literal dollars a piece when thrifting, and OG Xbox because we try and LAN a few times a year. I agree with that. Right now is a great time to be picking up old 360 games because it's old enough. It's one generation old that it's old enough to just be old games, who cares, but not so old as to be collectible yet. So this is the time to pick those games up because they cost nothing, and then as they get a little bit more rare and become a little bit more vintage and classic, they'll start to go up in value and they'll be more expensive to collect for that system. So 360, great time. Anyway, back to the email. This weekend is a LAN weekend for him and his buddies, for Ryan and his buddies, and he attached a pic as well. I hope Mike has a Pikachu N64 he jams on. If not, maybe we should start a GoFundMe for the cause.
I'm into it. I don't have one, and I would love one.
Ooh, all right. We should be thinking about that.
That can't be too expensive of a GoFundMe.
Tyler's mention of Quake 3 on Dreamcast made my day. I played so much of that online when it was new. I used to use my Dreamcast keyboard with a bunch of keys near the spacebar, and the spacebar mapped as jump, so I could use my foot to jump. Easily hundreds of hours spent on that game. That is awesome. I've just been playing that game sort of myself, just to mess around on it. There aren't really anybody playing online. Servers load up if you do with the Raspberry Pi Dream Pi thing set up that I have. I think I talked about this last week on the podcast. Some servers will come up, but when you log into them, it's just bots playing, so there aren't any people on there. But that's awesome that you got to play it back when there were actual real people playing it. So yeah, can't wait to listen to more Metal Gear and Zelda, maybe even some Castlevania soon. Later, my dudes.
Ooh, Castlevania.
So, that's our email. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me go to the review. You want to do the review? We got a new review.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here comes the new review. All right. Man, I wish I was more prepared than this moment. This is embarrassing. You know what I mean? Everyone knows about it. Everyone's like, man, that Mike guy, he's never, ever prepped. That's what they say about me. Is that what you say about me, Tyler?
No, I never say that.
Oh, gosh, you're so nice. All right, it's a 5-star review from Nizzy Boy. There's three Z's in it. That's how you say it, probably, right?
Sure.
Love these guys. I have been an avid listener for about 5 months. Oh, that's so nice. And have never been disappointed with any episode you guys do. That's even nicer. The funny
thanks.
mixture they provide is a great listen and at work. Brings me back when we talk about games from my childhood, from Fallout to Ratchet and Clank. It's great. And I love that they inspired me to start my own podcast on similar topics within gaming. Oh, that's wonderful.
That's awesome.
Keep up the great work. If you love video games and just pure comedy gold, give these guys a listen. Yeah, he wrote this before I made the Fat Boy Slim pun. For sure.
You may want to revise your review after that one.
That's right. Thank you all so much for listening. We're going to call it there because it's a little bit of a longer episode, but we'll catch you guys next week. As always, you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at Tyler at SneakerElf, ELPH. You can tweet at me at Micoletta, and that's the show. Do you want to say bye to everyone, Tyler?
Yeah, bye, everyone. We're breaking records here. I was just going to see how long the silence would go on there. Solid. Okay.
I was waiting for you to talk. Oh, write the time down. That's hilarious.